And we're back. Lee has been telling us about the Dyatlov Pass incident and mangling Russian pronunciation.
Oh, so you did not ask me to pronounce these correctly.
There's going to be a lot more where that came from. All right, Lee, tell us what could have happened to these Dyatlov hikers. 9 people who got caught in a snowstorm in a high mountain pass in January in Russia, ran out from a tent, even, it appears, cut their way out of this tent, ran out in essentially their underwear, not much else, socks, bare feet in some cases, and most of the group headed for a ravine, and then what happens? What happened to everybody? And why do conspiracy theorists latch on to this story?
Well, so let's talk about... So 6 of the group died of hypothermia, which would be the likely scenario in most of those in the most likely situation. They got scared and left their tent and did not go back, right?
Sure.
Hypothermia makes the most sense. But there were 3 fatal injuries, and these fatal injuries are kind of strange. So, for example, let me get names real quick. Igor and Yuri, another Yuri, not Yuri Yudin, Yuri Doroskov died of hypothermia. Gregory Alexander, Zenita, Rustam, all died of hypothermia. Now, here's the weird one. Ludmila Dubedin, I hate this.
Keep going.
Died of internal bleeding from a severe chest trauma. Seymour Alexander, the older person in the group, severe chest trauma. Now, that's strange. And then the last one was Nicolia Thurbidas Ox Bringonoles. Died of a...
Keep going.
Died of a fatal skull injury. I think you did this just to make me pronounce these names.
Yeah, dude. Okay, so this skull injury, Lee, we're talking like a fractured skull?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
A small skull fracture. And that was, a major skull damage. Dubinin and Zoltolov had major chest fractures and chest trauma. And this would have been an extremely high impact. According to Boris Zorevskin, there's a Denny in there, I see that, who was one of the chief medical examiners, that would have been to create those injuries, it would have been a force similar to a car crash. Notably, there were no external wounds associated with these bone fractures, as if they'd been subject to some sort of high level of pressure.
Okay, so Lee, one of the theories is that a group of native people who live near the mountain and consider it sacred territory and would have thought of these hikers as interlopers attacked the group. But what you just said there's no external injuries. So that would be very inconsistent with like a fight that 2 people had. There would be some kind of external damage.
Yeah. And even like short of some real big guy picking somebody up in like a bear hug and just crushing them till they die, I can't imagine a way another person could inflict those kind of injuries to a person's body.
Lee, that goes into, that's another one of the conspiracy
I know
theories.
it is. I'm just trying to.
Well, tell the people about it. They want to know. They want to know how this happened.
Bigfoot.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, Bigfoot is a possible option. Or the Yeti, or...
No, Lee. An Asian Bigfoot is called a Yeti. Everyone knows this.
Fine. The Yeti. It is believed that potentially a Yeti could have caused those injuries. And honestly, by the definitions of what Yeti seem to have in strength and upper body strength, I could see that. Getting caught in a bear hug from something like that, oh man, just crushed.
Right.
Just crushed.
I mean, but let's be honest, that's a pretty Looney Tunes theory, right?
Well,
I mean, there's no evidence beyond the crushing injuries that could support that.
There was a picture that a lot of these people with this theory fall back on. There was a picture from earlier in the expedition of a large, shadowy figure behind a picture of the group. Not all of the group, but a picture of some of the group members in the wood line behind them. Now, it's fairly easily debunked when you talked to Uden, who explained that they were in very good spirits, very jovial, having a ton of fun, taking goofy pictures, and joking about things like that.
Oh, I see.
So, wait a minute. So what is that? So could it have been one of the members just standing along the wood line, pretending to be a Bigfoot or pretending to be some sort of...
Right.
That's the most... Once again, Occam's razor. Occam's razor. The most likely scenario is probably what happened. I love conspiracy theories.
Right.
I love Bigfoot. But we have to fall back on what is the most likely scenario. They were goofing around when they took that picture.
Sounds probable. So beyond the Yeti explanation and the, the savage tribe explanation, which is a very, colonial Western sort of attitude to have, which I guess even Russians could have. I mean, I'm sure some Russians probably looked down their nose at tribal folks. I mean, it's not unique to the United States or Europe. So what other theories are there as to what could have happened to these kids?
Aliens is an option.
Aliens?
Aliens?
Is that so?
What?
We got aliens and Bigfoot in this story?
Oh yeah, aliens is a potential option. I've heard that one said.
Okay, well, isn't aliens maybe an option for like everything? People are like, where did humans come from? They're like, aliens?
Exactly. It's a
aliens is an answer for everything. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard it said, but Dan, I came into this show wanting to be like the biggest believer possible, and the more research I do, the more I'm like, walks like a duck, talks like a duck. It's probably a duck, right? So,
well, Lee, there's one explanation beyond aliens, because I know weren't there some villagers who said they saw like lights in the sky? There were some alleged UFO sightings around the time of this tragic incident.
Yeah. But and unfortunately, if those UFO sightings did occur, there's a fairly good chance that it was the Russian military testing different things. There was actually documented evidence of there being a military base nearby.
I mean, and this was at a time where the Soviets didn't tell people jack or shit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
About what they were doing.
No. So, in the general area, was there potential for some sort of military experimentation? experimenting on different weapons or different flight systems. I believe that that's definitely possible. I don't necessarily think that it would be the entire thing. Now, there was some speculation that it was the reason they ripped themselves out of the tent like they did was because they had been exposed to radiation because of a Russian nuclear experiment that was being performed in the area.
Oh, indeed. Oh, I love it. So not only are there Russian test flights over this area, but there's also weapon tests, which could be possible explanations for UFO sightings, maybe a possible explanation for what happened to these kids. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely a possible explanation, and you can honestly see where medical examiners would possibly be coerced into explaining it away in some different ways, or just dismissing it and not actually fully investigating what happened. That being said, from what paperwork there is left from that, they did supposedly check for radiation. The radiation shows that it was not much worse than background radiation. But I have a theory. There's one last potential suspect that I can think of. Dan,
okay, lay it on me.
Avalanche.
Avalanche.
Yeah. The reason that I say Avalanche is a potential explanation is you're in the mountains.
Yup.
Avalanches happen.
Yup.
Pretty easily.
Yup.
You chose to camp out on a
slope.
And now for me, for my cognitive connections here, I look at some of those injuries. Skull injury, super easy in an avalanche. Super. You get caught up in the avalanche, hit a rock, you're done, right? Hit a rock or a tree or what have you, right?
Uh-huh.
Now, torso injuries, like the ones to the chest, also, in my opinion, and granted, I'm not a doctor, but it feels like it could be more, or potentially more likely than Sasquatch crushing your chest. Because think of it. What is soft but can move at the rate of a semi-truck and hits with the force of a semi-truck but also kind of gives a little? I would think an avalanche.
Snow, yeah.
I would think snow would be similar to that. So
well, and one of the theories that I've heard put out there is there wasn't a lot of evidence for an avalanche, but potentially the fear of an avalanche could have sent the kids out of the tent. They could have heard something, thought they heard something, maybe seen a small avalanche coming, and it sent them scared down the mountain.
Fair. And that's another thing. That is another huge theory that is toted that I actually forgot to mention. Probably the last piece of this would be infrasound is also believed to be an issue, or a potential culprit, which could heighten the fear of an avalanche, create that panic scenario. For the listeners, infrasound is essentially a sound decibel that is low enough to where we don't actually perceive it audioly, yeah, sure, with actual hearing, but it's actually perceived by the body in a couple different ways, and mainly in producing an air of uncomfortableness bordering on fear and panic. And I think Dan was the one that told me about this, was that it actually shakes the liquid in your eyes, which would scare the shit out of me, Dan. I'm just gonna say,
Yeah.
Like,
well, and the thing is, the infrasound still hits your eardrum. It's just that your senses can't interpret it. So your eardrum does have a lot to do with like your balance and flight or flight responses, all kinds of stuff like that. So it's really interesting how infrasound can affect the body without you ever actually hearing it.
yeah, and it really does. It can't. And there's scientific evidence that infrasound can create a panic scenario. Is there any evidence that infrasound is present in the Ural Mountains? Not that I found. Now, granted, I put a solid 25 minutes of research into this, so I could be wrong. But Dan's like, I fucking hate you right now, Lee. Like,
well, so no, Lee. Now there is another theory that I want to talk about that you haven't gone over, but is one that I thought was very interesting. All right. What is another thing that can hit somebody extremely hard enough to throw them through the air, that can wreck a campsite?
Are we talking in movies or in real life?
In real life, that could potentially cause an avalanche, and that does create infrasound. Wind.
Okay.
So what happens in some mountain ranges, and can particularly happen in this section of the Urals, this mountain, what was it again, Lee? Kala something?
Oh, I hate you. Kalat Sikal.
Yeah, it essentially, my understanding is Kalat means dome, right? So when wind hits a mountain, it has to kind of split to go around it, right?
Okay.
And this can create vortices where the wind comes and meets up and all kinds of stuff like that. So these vortices, which are, dust devils or little tornadoes.
Are you telling me that they got picked up by a tornado, and instead of being taken to the land of Oz?
Well, it's not really a tornado. It's an extremely powerful dust devil. Essentially,
sorry.
That can happen at altitude. It can happen around like skyscrapers too. Can create these vortices. That's why modern skyscrapers like the Burj Khalifa, and some of these taller ones that they're building in China and the U.S. now, sometimes we'll have a twist to help the wind move around the building.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you just say the Wiz Khalifa?
With the rotation. The Burj Khalifa.
Oh, that makes...
It's the tallest building in the world.
I know,
It's
but I
in
thought you
Dubai.
said the Wiz Khalifa, and I was like, no, that's a rapper.
No. Like, they're created with this rotation in mind, and there's a rotation put to the building to help move the wind around them. So potentially, I mean, what if it was a crazy windstorm hit, makes them feel like there might be a avalanche coming, and they exit the camp. It wrecks their camp, maybe injures some of the group, maybe not. And the next thing you know, they're out in the cold trying to survive. They built a fire, which wasn't going to help them in their underwear. Some of them try to return to camp. Slowly, they succumb to the effects of hypothermia, which includes paradoxical undressing, where people start taking off their clothes, because they feel hot or whatever, and they just all succumb to the elements.
It's possible. I also have another theory.
Shoot.
My favorite theory of all, and I'm serious, this is my favorite theory of all. So Alexander, being much older than the other 9, Also, not being really known to them until they're on the way there, just kind of like latches on at the last minute, right?
Uh-huh.
Spy.
Oh. For like the KGB?
For the KGB, or maybe even for another foreign body, in an attempt to get a view of the military experimentation that's happening up there.
Oh, and so this fits in with the army killed everybody theory.
Uh-huh.
The Russians find out about him. They kill the whole group and they stage the scene so that it looks like they've frozen to death.
Yeah. Or everything falls apart just in the group, and he has to, I don't know, do something like that. That being said,
I do like this theory where like the Red Army is responsible for it all, or the KGB.
Yeah.
Like it's very cloak and dagger. I love it, and it's the Cold War, so it fits.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's where the thoughts fall apart. No evidence of any sort of fighting. All right, so let's be real. Most likely not the Alexander kid, or not the Alexander guy, because if it was him like killing them, there would have been some evidence of like a fight. And he probably would have been beaten by the 8 other people that are there, right? Like, it's not.
Yeah, well, you would expect 20-somethings would fight back, right?
Exactly. Right.
These are all kids. They wouldn't just sit there at gunpoint and freeze to death. That sounds like a really. I'd much rather be shot.
Yeah, I would rather. I would rather be shot than freeze to death. But let's say the government does find out about it. And they send agents out to basically stop them. When you've got military weapons pointed at you, even at a young age, you're not going to fight back, especially if it's your own government, right? Or in most cases.
Oh, yeah, good point. Maybe they didn't expect that. Yeah.
The government shows up. Several agents come out with their weapons drawn, force them. Maybe they try to escape out the back of the tent, force them out of the tent, march them in different directions or something, and let them die to the elements because they can do that because they have the power to, right?
Seems like a whole lot to go through on a negative 30-degree night.
Exactly. Let's go with another possible theory, and probably, in my opinion, the most likely of them. I believe that it was an avalanche that caused the injuries to the 3 people that were injured. They were part of the group that went in a different direction than the other portion of the group. Now, in my thought process is maybe there was an avalanche. Maybe one part of the group chose to go the direction that got them away from the avalanche's pull, or where the avalanche was going, and another part of the group chose to go in a different direction that ended up putting them right in the path of the avalanche. Because we're forgetting that avalanches have paths. They have directions, and they're usually going to travel similar to what a river is going to travel. They're going to travel the path of least resistance. Well, I believe Dyatlov was one of the survivors, and he was not part of the group that was found, or not one of the survivors, but one of the ones that died of hypothermia. And he was not part of the group that was found in the gully. But let's think about it. In a gully, or in wherever they were, is it possible that they went down there and then they got caught in an avalanche either at the same time or a separate event shortly after? It's definitely possible.
Well, I've heard that they theorize they went towards this ridge or ravine or whatever for avalanche protection, so it's completely possible. Yeah, I think you're right, Lee. The most likely thing is there was some kind of natural event, whether it was wind or avalanche or whatever, something that was probably fairly small but still significant, that essentially scared them into believing there would be a greater avalanche and they needed to leave. They go outside the tent into the night, into the cold. The mountains were notorious for storms. If you go out into a whiteout conditions, I mean, there's a very good chance you won't make it back.
Uh-huh.
I mean, even if you were fully prepared, if you had all your clothes, all your gear, everything, if you go into a nighttime whiteout in the mountains, you're going to have it rough. So, and then once the hypothermia sets in, your brain doesn't work right, and it's just not going to make the decisions that will get you anywhere safely.
Yeah. And I think that was ultimately the downfall of the group. I honestly believe that is the most likely scenario of the injuries that occurred, the ones that did not die of hypothermia, most likely occurred in an avalanche scenario. I don't think it occurred at the tent site. I think they got driven out by maybe the sounds of an avalanche, and maybe they got driven out into the night, and then at that point, because I'm still trying to think of what would drive them to cut their way out of the tent, and my only guess would be thinking that they're not getting out of the tent fast enough, right? Some of them are going out the front, but there's not enough room for everybody to go out the front at once, right? So,
yeah. Yeah, wow. Wild and crazy story. Now, Lee, I think we've got just a little bit more about how this connects to some other stories we've done, but we should probably take a really quick break, and we'll come back to wrap this up.
All right.